My name is Jennifer Dizo, and I am a principal with the BTI Consulting Group, and I'm going to be leading today's webinar. Many pricing discussions, as we know, they tend to end in our client's favorite question. What discount can I get? A few data points here. Obviously, we know the present economy, we're in a just price hypersensitivity. And the fact that we are currently in a buyer's market for legal services, well, that's driven the act of discounting up to an all-time high. We have 75% of legal decision makers report receiving discounts from their law firms. And on average, that discount can range from, the average is about 15%, ranges up to about as high as 30%. So really aggressive pricing going on out there. Now, the major problems with discounting. Obviously, the biggest is we make less money. The second one is what I consider to be the most important one. It starts a battle of diminishing returns. Once you start discounting your rates, you are turning your own work into a commodity. What this tells clients, what you're effectively saying when you give them a discount is, this is no longer about the value that I provide to you, it is only about the price. And guys, anybody can beat you on price. So we really, I don't want us to be in a situation where we're just discounting because it does. It immediately takes the value out of the equation. The third piece is that the more you discount, the more you cheapen your brand. And clients, they don't pride themselves on hiring cheap people, they pride themselves on hiring smart people. It's the smart people that they tell their peers about. It's how you get recommendations, not because you have the lowest prices in town. So we want to make sure that everybody on this call today are the smart people. So it's time to break the discount cycle. Okay, so the question's there. It's lingering in the air. What kind of discount can you offer me? The ball is in your court. The first thing that we want to do is counter back immediately with a question. You've just gone through the value discussion. You've presumably made a reasonable recommendation to the client. We're going to assume for the moment that you haven't made some massive miscalculation in your budget. And if the client is still pushing on price at this point, what we need to understand is, are they really just being unreasonable, or is there a true financial constraint on their end? So to do that, we need to ask some questions around those critical priorities that we've already discussed with them. Don't discuss any sort of price change. Don't say that, we'll cut the costs once we figure out what your priorities are. You just want to revisit the priorities on a standalone basis. So you might say something like, I appreciate that the number's overwhelming. However, when we were discussing your needs, you indicated timeline was your most pressing priority. In order to meet this aggressive timeline, we have to staff our fastest, our most experienced partners on this matter. Now, when you have this conversation, we want this to be a casual conversation. Use your normal tone, your normal cadence. Now is not the time for an awkward break in the flow of conversation. Clients will sense this. If you tend to get a little stiffer, they interpret that as their signal to go in for the kill. If you're a joking person, you can laugh it off. Oh yeah, I know these prices seem high, but let's take a look at what we're trying to accomplish. And it really is that easy. Once you know the phrases, and I like to call them my judo phrases, where I turn the conversation around quickly. Once you have these phrases in your back pocket, we want these to be the phrases that you think of saying first, rather than how does a 10% cut sound to you. Now I get it, this is not a bulletproof approach to get them to stand down, but it does open the conversation again, because the client is now forced to reevaluate their needs. Sometimes this alone actually does end the discussion. Sometimes we need to push it further, and that leads us right into step 2. Step 2 is to stop talking. You've said the critical piece. The client will understand it is their turn to respond. Too much explaining at this stage undermines your conviction and your authority that you've given the client a fair price. So stay silent, even if it gets a little awkward. This is the step that I have the hardest time with. But it's time to let the client just talk about what they're thinking after you've sort of implied that we're not going to go the discount route. Let's see what we can do with the work. So at this point, usually the conversation will go and be refocused on the priorities, since that is what we asked them to do in step one. Or honestly, if the client says anything, it's time to just move into step three. And step three is where we revisit the scope and not the price. So whether we're trying to bring in a new client, or if we're engaging with a client that we've already done work and even discounts for in the past, we are going to use this conversation to establish the new normal, which is not going to be discounts. So rather than conceding and adjusting the price at this point based on them asking for a discount, we want to go and adjust the scope of the matter so that the price automatically adjusts in return. And so how we go about doing this is, back to our conversation. Let's go through this matter again. Let's see what we can do, because I'm sure there's a few areas where we can work on the cost. So instead of giving in on the discount, we're saying we're going to reevaluate your needs and then adjust the options that we have. The wording's intentional. We want to make sure that we're positioning ourselves as working with the client, helping them meet their needs. Because if we really want this to turn into a long-term partnership, a long-term relationship, providing options rather than just discounting or negotiating to the bone, those options are going to be your best bet. Now, this is where we need to start looking at how we as a law firm are going to leverage the project. And as we talk through this with the client, we need to make sure that we're explaining the entire time the impact of any adjustments that we make. And by leverage, I mean, we're going to push work down to lower level attorneys whose hourly rates are probably lower. We may consider, streamlining processes somewhere. Maybe they don't need as many, briefs or reports, whatever the case may be. The idea is we want to start figuring out how we can either cut down on hours, cut down on rates, or cut out steps of the process. And the idea behind this is that although this would ultimately lower the revenue that the firm makes, because at the end this will end up with a lower cost for the client, it's going to increase the profitability of the firm because you've pushed the work down. And in fact, what it does is it frees up more senior partner time to go and bill more complex work, and also to go do everybody's favorite thing, more business development. Now, I understand this process clearly is not as easy as simply providing the discount and moving into the work, but it establishes the precedent for which the relationship is going to be built on moving forward. So once you've gone through step three, the majority of your clients at this stage will have either agreed to your original rate or they will have opted for one of your proposed alternatives. However, there's always a very small but a few holdouts at this stage. And these individuals fall into one of three categories. We have those who really don't understand how much legal services cost. We have clients who really do have a much bigger financial issue that they are not sharing with us. Or maybe they're like the father from A Christmas Story and they really just love to haggle a good deal. But at this stage, if the client is still hedging and they're still reluctant to agree to move forward over their cost concerns, it's time for step four. And step four is to confront them. In the nicest way possible, of course. But if they have not told you at this point what their goal price is or what their goal discount is, ask them outright. What range of fees are within your realm of expectations? This is your last olive branch to the client, indicating that there is flexibility, but it doesn't have you commit to a price that you might regret later. Now, once they offer up this number that they've picked randomly, probably in their head, you will then, of course, need to go back and revisit the scope to see if there are additional ways to bring down the expense of the matter without sacrificing the outcome. If you cannot find a way to do this, or if you simply know that the number that the client gave you is completely unrealistic, you go to step 5. Know and stick to your limit. So this is where the pre-work for the entire rate negotiation discussion comes into play. In that pre-work, you will have figured out the price that you are going to offer the client. You will have figured out the cost and the prices of the alternative options. And the third piece that you figure out is your reserve number, the lowest possible number that you are willing to consider. This is your, your threshold go, no go number. And you base this number off of whatever the firm, quite frankly, holds dearest, which is usually either profitability, revenue, or anticipated realization. But whichever metric the firm holds dearest, that's going to be the number that you will have a reserve number set and then stick to the number. There's nothing wrong with negotiating. Everyone, including a good client, wants to get the best deal possible. However, if a client is overly pushy about prices from the start, I would take this as a red flag. If your pricing is fair and if your work product is high quality, don't worry about losing a few of these clients. And I'm sure there's people gasping as I say those words, but really these are the same clients who will ultimately eat away at the firms and at your bottom line. So there is great value and wisdom in turning away somebody who is going to push you down to that very last penny. With that, I do want to thank everyone again today for joining me. I do welcome you to reach out to me directly, and my number and my email are on the screen. Feel free to reach out to me if you have specific questions.